Hi, welcome to 20 Ideas using 2.5-inch strips with GourmetQuilter. We're having a lot of fun with this series. We've already done 11 of our 20 ideas, and so this is, guess what, idea number 12. So we're going to make a kind of a round drawstring bag. I thought it was quite nice to do something a different shape for a change. We've got a nice little checkerboard base on it, we've got some nice strips around here, and then we've got a top, and it's all nicely lined and everything inside. And we've got a nice little drawstring on it too. So now we've done some of these little aspects before. We've made a drawstring like this before. We've quilted the base of a bag before. However, we're making this bag this time. So if you've already signed up with GourmetQuilter to receive the pattern, you'll have a pattern that looks a little bit like this. And if not, there's information on the website on gourmetquilter.com about the tasty treats for this year. And this is one of those. So I'm going to get started. So we're going to start making the base of the bag. So for the base, and look at these delicious colours. You know, growing up I was told that blue and green should never be seen. Well, I'm obviously very disobedient. So I've gone ahead, I've made up the squares. It's just sewing together squares. There's nothing particularly hard about that. And I've layered it with the batting, and this is my lining fabric. So I'm going to put in 2 layers of batting. It's just a thin cotton batting. For the base, and my squares is just ever so slightly larger. It doesn't matter too much. We will be trimming it down into a circle, so everything is a bit larger than the circle. So I'm going to go ahead and quilt that. I like to use 2 layers of batting in the base because it just makes it a little bit firmer. So all I'm actually going to do is a grid. I'm going to come up the centre of the squares in both directions on all of them. So 4 rows each side. So I've already got my machine ready to go. I've got a slightly larger stitch because I like to do that when I'm quilting, and I'm just going to do some straight lines, nothing hard about that, and so that we get some nice firmness on the base. It doesn't have to be straight lines. You could quilt anything you like on this. It would be all free motion stitched, or that would be fun. So I'll go ahead now that you know what I'm doing, and I will get all my quilting done, and I'll come back and show you what to do next. So I've gone ahead, I've finished all my quilting, just a simple grid on there and through to the lining, of course. So next we need to cut that shape out. So there is a shape in the pattern that you can trace. I've cut mine out as a piece of paper, or if you're going to reuse a shape like this, it's quite a good idea to use something like a pattern tracing violin, like an interfacing type product for patterns like this, because then you can keep them and reuse them, but paper's good too. So I've actually already drawn around my circle so that I can cut it. Now I could cut it with scissors, or I can cut it with a rotary cutter, just following that line. You just have to be careful if you're going to use the rotary cutter. You don't want it slipping and cutting those little fingers. However, I'm going to do that. I could move this away and just cut the pencil line, or I can just cut near this. So it's just a matter of following that curve around to do some nice curvy bits. So you want to have your circle as reasonably round as you can get it. Nobody is going to measure it except you, possibly. So there we have a nice little circle. Oops, just missed a touch there. So that's all looking pretty good. So we can pop that to one side now, knowing that we've done that little bit, and we can get started on the top. So on the bag here, we're going to make this top bit with the drawstring casings and things at the moment. So it's got lining fabric, and it's got an outer fabric, and it's got a casing fabric. So we're going to make that little bit next. I'm just imagining that bag full of delicious things, all sorts of things. So I've already gone ahead, we've made casings like this before. I've made the casings, it's 2 strips of fabric that are joined at the ends there and then turned out the right way and then just pressed in half. So I've gone ahead and done those 2, you need 1 for each side. The casing is in 2 halves. And then this is my lining fabric here, and then this is my outer fabric. This is the top where I've got the red and white stripe here. It's going to be delicious blue dots. So what we need to do now is probably find the center Just a little finger press will do. And I use my board a lot to help me line things up, so wherever that finger press line has gone, I'm going to put that on a line so that I know it's there, because I want to position these with the raw edges level with that top edge just half an inch away from the center, so that they're actually going to be half and half, so there's an inch between them. And I think that's looking pretty good. And then I want to place my lining right sides together with that as well, so that all those edges there are together. And then I may just pop a couple of little clips in just to hold those in place, or pins, something. So because we're just going to stitch all the way along this edge, including those casings. So I can go ahead and start stitching now, just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance as we do. So I'll go ahead and do this, and I'll come back and show you the next bit. So I've done my seam. When I open that out, I've got those little casings. They're going to pop up above like that. For the moment, we just want to press the seam towards the lining is probably the easiest answer. And now we just want to join, we want to join this up into like a loop. So we just need to bring those short edges together and do a seam down here, and then we're going to turn it out the right way and press that lining inside with the casings up above. So I'll go ahead and get that done, and because I think you know how to sew a little seam like this, and show you what we're going to do next. So I'm just actually top stitching around the top edge. I've nearly done all that, so I'll just show you that. It's looking pretty good already. We've got a bottom and a top of a bag, we just need to get that middle sorted out. So this is my lining, that's the inside. So I've turned it all out, I've pressed the lining inside, and I've just top stitched just close to that seam edge there. So that's looking pretty good. We've got our casings. So now we can set that aside as well. And now we need to work on these sides of the bag. So we've just got these vertical strips, but we're going to do them onto the batting, so like a quilt as you go, rather than having to come back and quilt it afterwards. So just the batting. Again, I'm using the cotton batting, it's really good for this sort of thing. And I've got my strips, so the batting and the strips are cut the same size, so that we can just go along quite happily, and we will be just trimming a little bit off if we get the edges just wander just a touch, so we don't need to worry too much about that. So I've placed my first strip down here, and then I've got my next one ready to go. So I'm going to place it right sides together, and I'm just going to stitch through the batting and the fabric down there, and then we flip that back, and then it's already on there and quilted too. So we'll just get started. So this little bit here that's in your way, we can just roll that up, go to the machine, and we can just stitch our first seam. So now it's a good idea to press in between so that you get a nice flat seam there. And then we just need to repeat that all the way along. So you'd want to have your fabrics perhaps in a little pile of the order you're going to sew them in, or something like that. So we'll just do the next one, and so it goes on. So I can go ahead and sew my strips together into the row, and then I will show you what happens next. So I've gone ahead, I've sewn all my strips on, and they're looking pretty vibrant, I have to say. So now we just need to trim it down to size. So we just want to trim off this extra batting at the ends here. And then I'm going to just trim this way as well. So to get it nice, and we want to make sure it's going to stay nice and straight. We're not trimming off very much, it's just a little bit. Now my ruler's not quite long enough. However, I can line the ruler up with a line on the board, and I can just get that to sit nice and straight. And I can bring it up here to that next marker on the board and come out the end there. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. It's looking pretty good. Again, it's not very much to trim, but it does make a difference to have things sitting nice. Where are we at here? Get that nice and straight. There we go. Look at that. Excellent. So that's all nicely trimmed now. It's the size we want it to be. And we're ready to do something else with it now. So that's pretty exciting. So we've got a lining piece as well, the same size. So we need to make both of those now into little tubes, loops, whatever it is that we're going to call them. So we're going to sew the short edges together of both of them as separate pieces so that we can then start assembling the bag together as well. So I'll go ahead and do my two short edges. We're going to press this seams, both of the seams open, and I'll get all that done so that I can start showing you how to put it together. So I've joined up into a circle, loop, something, tube, and I've pressed my seams open on that, and I've done the same thing with my lining piece, so that's all ready to go. So we're going to start putting the bag together now. So having this, it's quite nice that it stands up with that batting in there. The top piece that we made previously with the casings, we want that one inside out. We want the bag the right side out because we're going to put this bag inside this. Now, I don't think it matters where this seam goes because it's a round bag. If you want the seam in a certain place, then you might need to do that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to position this in here because I think you'll find that everything should fit fairly well. If you're not too sure about that, you could mark little quarter points on your bag and the top there, but basically it's all just got to be sewn together. And the same thing now with the lining. We want to pop the lining, we want the right side, so this is now, this is right sides together for the outside, and we want the lining to be right sides together too. So this is out the right way and this one is inside out. It's all very confusing, isn't it? Some go in, some go out, but we want to put this one over here as well so that all those raw edges are together and we can sew a seam around there. And what this does is gives us a really nice finish inside by doing it this way. So I'll just sort this out and we'll pop some clips around the top edge. So it's this top edge that we're doing. And as I said, I don't think the seams matter where they go particularly because everything is going to go round and round in circles. So I probably would put one in on the opposite side just so that we make sure that things are sitting fairly similarly all the way around, and sometimes you've just got to ease a little something, or it should really just fit, but we're working with fabric. Fabric moves itself around a little bit. It doesn't always think quite the same way we do. So we have to encourage it sometimes. But I think that is actually all looking really good. So we just need to sew around this seam now. So that's fairly easy to do on the sewing machine. We can just come in here and sew just our 1/4 inch seam allowance as usual. So I'll go ahead and stitch around here and I will show you what we're going to do next. So I've sewn around my seam and we're going to just pop that out the right way now, and all things being equal, we'll have a topper and sides of our bag in the right place. So we want to push that all down so it's all inside out at this stage, but it looks like everything's in its right place, so that's always encouraging. So what we now need to do is press all this down, and I will be doing a line of top stitching at the top of the side there. So it helps so if we've got it all sitting nice and flat before we do that. Cotton batting is great, but it does want to grip, so we just have to pull everything out a little bit, so that's really good. So just give that a quick press down along that seam line that we've just sewn, and then we'll do it as well on the outside. You just have to keep moving it around now that it's in a sort of squashed cylinder. So that's looking pretty good. We'll turn it out the right way and do the same thing to make sure that seam is sitting nicely on the outside. This bag is looking pretty good already. So putting a circle in is slightly different to putting in another shape, so we'll be doing that shortly, but we'll just get this top stitched. So to be able to get into it to top stitch it, I have found it's easiest again to turn it inside out. This poor bag goes in and out, in and out. And then you can actually just pull this back just enough, so if everything's sitting nice and flat in there, you probably can't see me actually stitching because it wants to bunch up there, but you can actually get in there, and I'm just going to stitch maybe not quite 1/4 inch away from that seam line and just come all the way around, and it's just, again, it's just rotating it and just making sure everything is pulled out as you go. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how we can put that base in. So I've gone ahead and I've done my row of top stitching along here, and I'm pretty pleased, everything's looking good. So now I'm going to show you how to put the base in. So we've already made the base, we cut it out to the size we want it, and I've just popped 4 pins in at the moment. Might be easier on this side, just at the 1/4 points. So it's easy enough to find a 1/4 point with a circle. You can fold it in half, and where that folds is halfway, and then you can fold it up so that those 2 markers sit together, and then this will be the halfway on the fold again. So we've now got our quarters marked. We need to do the same thing with the bag base, however we do want to turn it inside out again. This poor bag doesn't know whether it's coming or going. And I've just popped in 2 pins, so if you just pull it out, again, I don't think it matters where we are because we're going round. If you need your grid to be a certain way to line up, well, that's fine. I'm not too worried which way it goes because it doesn't really show when it's all made up. So I put my 2 side ones in, and the same thing to find the other 2 1/4 points of this, bring those points together and then pop a pin at each side. So much as I don't like pins, we do need pins today. We're going to need a few more very shortly. So I'll show you how to pin it in. Right, so that's there. So we're going to pop the circle now in. So we want it right sides together. So we're going to put that down, and we're going to work here. And I'm actually going to work on this side. It's just a bit harder for you to see. So we can just match up the 1/4 point pins and pin it together. So we can do that in all 4 places. And I found it easier to work towards the flatter side of the bag rather than the actual circle for when we're sewing. So I'm pinning it from this side. It's easier to pin. The next stage of pinning that we'll be doing is easier if you can see where it's all going. So we've got quite a lot of thickness here. We've got 2 layers of batting in the base, and we've got one in the sides here. So we've got to be a little bit careful that things don't move too much when it's that thick. So what we've got here is a nice little gap here, but this should all fit. So we can fit another 2, if not 3 pins, possibly a 3rd one. More pins is better. We don't want it moving, so don't skimp on the pins. It won't be helpful in the long term, because what happens is when you're sewing, it moves in, and that's not good. And we like good. So I'm going to go around doing all this pinning. So do again, put one in the middle of the space and then one to each side between again, and you'll find that you can just ease that nicely around. It should all fit really well. So we're getting a whole lot of pins going on here, and we'll just have to watch that these bits don't bunch in when we come to actually sew that. But I'll go ahead and finish off the pinning. I think you've got the hang of it now, and I'll show you when I'm doing the sewing. So I've finished all my pinning. It's looking a little extreme and I'm a little nervous about how many times I'm going to be stabbed. However, I'm going to have a good circle sewn in there. So I'm going to sew it from this side, which is a little bit bulky, but so that I can just see how it's easing through. But I've got to make sure that this is all sitting, and a lot of that has to be done really by feel as you go. So just take your time. So I'm going to go to the machine now. Hopefully you'll be able to see this and it won't sort of bunch up on you. Try and make sure all your raw edges are staying together. Doesn't really matter where you start. 1/4 inch seam allowance as usual. And then just take the pins out as you're coming up to them. And then just ease that around. And just take it slowly. And mind out for those pins, because one just got me already. But this is looking pretty good so far. So just keep moving things around, making sure that everything is sitting nicely underneath, on the edges. Just keep working with it. Just keep on going, I think. Oh, we're looking good. Getting on well. We're about 3/4 of the way around already. Oh, the end's in sight. It's got to happen soon. So here we are, coming up back to where I started. It's looking pretty good. So we've now got a nice little circle sitting in the base there. This is all looking mostly pretty good. It's just caught a touch in that seam there, but I think that's all looking great. So what we now need to do is just finally trim that little edge. And so I don't think we need to trim it sort of super short or anything, but we're just trying to make it so that it's all nice and even. We've done this before. We're going to overcast those edges with a zigzag stitch. So I'll go ahead and just get my edges trimmed and set my machine up with a zigzag stitch and come back and show you how I'm doing that. So I've gone ahead and I've done my little bits of trimming and I'm ready to, will be ready to go as soon as that fabric gets out of the way there. I'm going to zigzag all the way around the edge here. I've got a zigzag stitch on my machine, just whatever it is, nothing different. And I'm just going to take it slowly and make sure that all those little edges are overcast. Now this isn't absolutely essential to do, I just think because it is an exposed seam inside the bag that it's nice to have the edges all done. So I'm actually going to most likely go around this twice because it's a bit hard to trim a curved seam exactly. So often on something like this I'll do it a second time around and that pretty much gathers in all the little bits of threads and bits. It depends a little bit what you're going to use the bag for. Of course if I fill it up with chocolate it doesn't mind little bits of thread here and there. But if I was going to put something else in I might not want all those little bits of fibre getting around. So, and it's just nice and tidy because everything else is really tidy. So I'll go ahead and finish this off. It's just the same thing and I'll go around a second time as well. So I'm pretty happy with my bag base. It's looking pretty good. I've done my second round of zigzagging, so everything's sitting nice and clean and tidy in there. Everything else is all nicely covered in, so it's worked out really well. And now this lucky bag can come out the right way and probably stay out the right way now. So just run your fingers around that seam that we've just done with the circle, and it should all sit really nicely for you. So that's looking pretty good. And now we've just got to pop the cord in the top so that we can draw it in. So I've got my cord ready. We're going to put little cord ends on. So we've done this before on a couple of little bags in this series, but I've gone ahead. So I've made one. I've got the second one here. So it's just fabric, like a little pocket to put the cord ends into. So it's just folded fabric and folded back so that we can then do a nice big seam because it's easier, and then just trim off these little sides here and turn it out the right way so that when we've popped the cord in we can sew these onto the ends so that they're all kept nice and tidy. So I'll just turn this one out so that we can be ready. Oh, it's exciting. So just push those little corners out. So it's just a little pocket really. Just makes it a nice finish on the cord. So I've got my cord ready here. So we're going to have two cords so that we can pull from both sides. So I'm going to put both cords through from one end, and we have to take one off and bring the other one back, and then take the other one the other way. So we want two ends out each side. So we can leave one on there, and just don't pull it all the way through, let it hang out a little bit there. And push this one back through here. So I'm just using a large safety pin, or a bodkin's a good thing. Now it's quite a good idea to sew an end on now rather than pushing the other one through, because sometimes it takes the cord back with it, which is also not helpful. So I've just got my cord ends here, and I've got my little pocket here for them. I'm just going to push them all the way in, and then I'm just going to stitch right across there through the cord to hold all that in there, and that gives us something to hold on to. So I'm just going to stitch across, and I'm just going to turn around and stitch back the other way as well, so that we've got double stitching over those bits of cord, and then a little back stitch to finish off. So that was pretty straightforward to do that one, and so now I just need to do the other one, and we've just about finished. And I've put my safety pin here. So this time we're going to come out at the other end to have the other handle on the other end. Tucking cords in pockets is kind of a fun occupation because it's just the last little job to do. And here we have a very delicious round, or round bottomed at any rate, drawstring bag. How cute is that? So we now have two of these in different colourways so that you can have some idea of how things look. I've very much done the checkerboard here. I didn't do so much of, I didn't bring every colour into the bottom on this one, but I think that they're looking pretty good. So I just thought it was great to have a go at a circle for a change. We've done lots of straight lines and things, so we now have a nice round bottom drawstring bag, and that was the end of idea number 12. Thank you, and I will see you with idea number 13.